Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the 2013 USAA Veterans Day ceremony. We begin by honoring the flag with our national anthem. Recent legislation allows all veterans to either salute or place their hand over their heart. Please rise as you are able.
So proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Thank you very much. We are the American Military Spouses Choir. As some of you know, please have a seat. As some of you know, we are all military spouses and we come from all over the United States. We represent all of the branches of the military. It's a real privilege for us to be here today to honor the veterans that have served this great country in a place where you serve them every day. We really have a special place in our heart for the veterans. But let's continue with our show by introducing your host for today. Some of you here in San Antonio may know her as the morning anchor on KSAT Channel 12, but she's also a military spouse with a story of her own. Would you please join me in welcoming our very own Leslie Mouton.
Good morning. It is such an honor and a privilege to be with you today, to be among veterans and all of those here who support veterans on this special occasion. Let's also give it up for the American Military Spouse Choir. Were they fantastic? All right. Now, our theme for this event today is Celebrate Service. Every veteran, every generation. I want you to take a look at these portraits. You'll see them changing throughout the program. And there's a special reason for them being there. They each have a special story, and we'll get to that a little bit later. And we'll hear more wonderful music a little later in the program as well. But first, I'd like to share a little personal story. My first job in television was in Alexandria, Louisiana. And I was selected, just a youngin' there, like 25 years old, to fly with the United States Thunderbirds. What an honor. As I sat in the briefing room waiting to go on this wonderful ride of my life, this good-looking, cocky guy in a flight suit and a helmet under his arm walks by, comes into the room and says, that's not what he said, comes in the room and he says, "Hi, my name's Mad Dog, I'm your pilot." I looked at him and I said, "No, you're not, I've already met my pilot." Well, he said, "Okay, I'm not your pilot," but we laughed and talked, and sure, he wasn't my pilot that day, but it turned out he would be my partner in life. 9 months later, no significance to that number, he got down on one knee and he said, "Marry me and I'll show you the world." And I said, "Okay." You know what our first assignment was? Del Rio, Texas. Now, I do have to admit that it is right next to Mexico, right? So I said, okay, you get a pass on that one. Before we went to Del Rio, though, I was given, when we got married, this little magnet that said in it, home is where the military sends you. And I found that that was true, whether it's Del Rio or San Antonio or wherever it was in the whole wide world. You had a family built in. You had people there waiting to love you and embrace you and support you through whatever it was. Whether it was a small town you had to live in or a deployment, which we also experienced more than once. When we were first married, when we were still in Alexandria, he was sent to Gulf War I. He was an A-10 pilot. He actually flew the first 4 ship of A-10s into battle. I remember watching on the news when the news came down that the war had started. What did I do? I ran to my family, the other wives who were going through it as well. And we hugged and we embraced and we cried, drank a little wine and hugged and embraced and cried and supported each other through it. And he came home safely, as did his whole squadron, thank goodness. And I learned right then that the bonds you make in the military are for life. A few years later, we would be in Sumter, South Carolina. He was then flying F-16s, and the Kosovo War broke out. Again, he left us for war. But I say us because it wasn't just me. We also had a little baby, Nicole. Now, when he left, she wasn't even crawling. When he came back, she toddled over to him. I'll never forget it. She was holding a little American flag, wearing a red, white, and blue outfit. And she toddled over, kind of suspicious, because she hadn't seen him in about 7 months. And he embraced her, and again, I was just happy he made it home. So when I tell you I appreciate your service, I mean it from the bottom of my heart, from my experience. Now, I'm honored to tell you that retired Major Tony Mad Dog Maddox is in the audience. Tony, would you please stand and be recognized? Now, speaking of veterans, I see a whole lot of other veterans in the audience as well. They're here in the front rows, and of course we want to recognize you. So I want to take a moment to introduce someone to come up and help me introduce the guests. So we have Mr. Greg Pratt, U.S. Navy Retired Force Master Chief. Now, when you're recognized, I ask that you please stand and face the audience, and I also ask that you please hold your applause until we've recognized all of them. Greg?
Thank you, Leslie. Representing the United States Army, Major General William Roy, Deputy Commanding General, U.S. Army North. Colonel Donald Taylor, Jr., Deputy Director, Joint Information Operations Warfare Command. Colonel William Sternhagen, Special Assistant to the Chief of Staff, U.S. Army North. Lieutenant Colonel John Davenport, Deputy Chief of Staff, Force Sustainment Command. Command Sergeant Major Jamie Johnson, Southern Regional Medical Command. Command Sergeant Major Orlando Bass, Support Operations Sergeant Major, Force Sustainment Command. Representing the United States Marine Corps, Major Andrew Terrell, 4th Reconnaissance Battalion. Staff Sergeant David Nesbitt, 4th Reconnaissance Battalion. Representing the United States Navy, Captain Gail Hathaway, Commander, Navy Medicine, Education and Training Command. Captain Steve Brown, Commanding Officer, Navy Operational Support Center. Captain Joel Rose, Commanding Officer, Medicine Training Support Center. Captain Jamie Hammer, Executive Officer, Navy Medicine Training Support Center. Commander Lee Alexander, Commanding Officer, Naval Technical Training Center, Lackland, and his wife, Christine. Commander Corey Judeman, Commanding Officer, Navy Recruiting District, San Antonio. Commander Michael Riggins, Executive Officer, Navy Information Operations Command, Texas. Commander Michael Riggs, Executive Officer, Navy Recruiting District, San Antonio. Command Master Chief James Barnes, Navy Information Operations Command, Texas. Command Master Chief Vaughn Coker, Navy Recruiting District, San Antonio. Command Master Chief Shannon Best, Navy Medicine Support Center. Representing the United States Air Force, Brigadier General John Horner, Commander, Air Force Recruiting Service. Brigadier General Mary Heitmeyer, Mobilization Assistant, Air Force Recruiting Service. Brigadier General John McCoy, Guard Assistant to the Commander, 24th Air Force. Colonel Gerald Goodfellow, Commander, 12th Flying Training Wing, and his wife, Christine. Colonel John Kane, Commander, 149th Fighter Wing, Texas Air National Guard. Colonel Mark Kammerer, Commander, 37th Training Wing, and his wife, Julie. Colonel Nicola Choate, Chief of Medical Staff, 59th Medical Wing. Colonel Clifton Perry, Chaplain, Air Force Intelligence, Surveillance and Reconnaissance. Chief Master Sergeant Gerardo Tapia, Command Chief Master Sergeant, Air Training and Education Command, and his wife Alice. Chief Master Sergeant Dino Mackin, Command Chief Master Sergeant, Air Force Personnel Center, and his wife, Valerie. Chief Master Sergeant Arlene Heath, Command Chief Master Sergeant, Air Force Intelligence Surveillance and Reconnaissance Agency, and her husband, Mark. Chief Master Sergeant Alfred Herring, Chief Master Sergeant, 24th Air Force. Chief Master Sergeant Troy Palmer, Command Chief Master Sergeant, 12th Flying Training Wing. Chief Master Sergeant Craig Ricker, Command Chief Master Sergeant, 37th Training Wing, and his wife, Ann. Chief Master Sergeant George Longoria, Command Chief Master Sergeant, 149th Fighter Training Wing, Texas Air National Guard. Representing the United States Coast Guard, Commander Eugene Enzano, Commanding Officer, Coast Guard Cryptological Unit, Texas. Master Chief Alan Paul, Command Master Chief, Coast Guard Cryptological Unit, Texas. We are honored to have some additional guests with us today. The Honorable Nelson Wolf, Bexar County Judge. The Honorable Jose Menendez, Texas House of Representatives. Mr. Dan Dellinger, National Commander, American Legion. Mr. Paul Mock, National Chair of the Employer Support of the Guard and Reserve. Also joining us are representatives from our affinity partners and community leaders. We ask our guests of our veteran and community organizations to rise as a group. Thank you for your service to our country and our community. Back to our host, Leslie.
Greg, thank you so very much. Thank you so much for being with us today. We really appreciate all your support. And we have other people that we'd like to recognize, by the way. We have employees who are in the National Guard and the Reserves. We would like you to please stand, and also those who are at our regional offices who may be watching in their office. We ask that you be stand and recognized as well. Please stand. We are also very fortunate on Veterans Day to have some extraordinarily special guests today. From the Warrior and Family Support Center, receiving treatment at the San Antonio Military Medical Center, as we all know as SAMC. We have some of our wounded warriors with us today. They've been injured in the line of duty. There are no words to express our gratitude. There is no way to properly thank you for your service, but we ask that you please stand if you are able to, so we may take a moment to recognize you as well. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for giving so much to this great country and for giving so much to me personally to make sure that I enjoy the freedoms of this great country. Thank you. Well, behind every veteran and every generation of veterans, there are those left behind, the family, the loved ones, the friends, giving strength, caring for the home front, and, of course, trying to stay brave. The American Military Spouses Choir, as you heard tonight, they represent that. I told you I'm fortunate enough to call myself a veteran's wife as well. But I do wonder, what would it be like to marry into one of the most iconic military families in America? What would it be like to live among legends?
In 1942, he stepped forth like some warrior of old to lead and inspire vast forces of men.
The name alone has come to mean leadership, patriotism, and commitment to duty. General George S. Patton, best known for leading the Third Army through Europe in World War II, embellished by a popular movie in the 1970s, his story of service matched only by his colorful personality. For his son, also George Patton, following in the footsteps of the four-star general must not have been easy. But he did not shy away from military service, proving himself in Korea and Vietnam. A decorated hero, earning the rank of Major General.
People ask about qualities that my husband and his father had. They stood behind what they believed. Both of them had deep caring for their troops.
Joanne Holbrook Patton was married to George Patton IV for 52 years before his death in 2004. We caught up with her in the family's historic home in Hamilton, Massachusetts. Among the iconic images, family memories, and awards for service to the nation.
We are entwined from way ages past. The Augusta General, when he was a young officer, worked for each of my grandfathers in time. One of them was the first chief of cavalry. The other was the last chief of horse cavalry, who was the one I knew. Always referred to that famous general as that young whippersnapper Patton.
But becoming a Patton and the attention that the name brought was hard to get used to, even for this fifth-generation Army daughter.
I was learning to be Mrs. Patton. I used to be terribly embarrassed when they asked me, "Are you related?" No.
Yet veterans who served in World War II with the larger-than-life general wanted to share their stories. An elderly retired officer bluntly told Joanne to own up to being a Patton.
It was one of the best pieces of advice I could have had, because I have been treated to myriad stories related to the old general. If I were taking a poll, I'd have to say that far more veterans were proud to brag that they were chewed out by the general than were decorated by him.
And there was life with the next generation. Her own husband at war, 4 times, 5 children at home.
We had 27 homes. People say, "What do you think it would take to be comfortable in this military life?"
Her advice? There is no getting it just right. Or, in the words of her sister-in-law,
once you've been married in the military, as long as I have, your cups and saucers won't match, your sets of napkins won't come out even, but you're happy to share with people who understand we're not in a world of perfection, but we are in a world of adventure, and let's enjoy it.
Wow, what a story and what a fine lady. 2 families married together, living in a world of service and adventure. Now, for decades, Joanne has dedicated herself to many volunteer opportunities. She wants to help all military families. The National Military Family Association, just one of the many that she does volunteer for. Proud to be a Patton, Joanne is a wonderful example of today's theme, celebrating service. Every veteran, every generation. Next, I want to introduce you to a member and leader at USAA who also personifies that very message. Take a look.
John Byrd, son of a career naval officer and a 1977 graduate of the United States Naval Academy, has spent a lifetime dedicated to service. A 35-year veteran of the U.S. Navy, he is a career submarine officer who served as Deputy Commander of the Pacific Fleet and the 46th Commander of the 7th Fleet. Just a few of his many accomplishments. His final Navy appointment, Director of the Navy Staff. Always an inspiring leader, Byrd retired from the Navy last year. Today, Vice Admiral Byrd is the Senior Vice President of Military Affairs at USAA, responsible for military outreach and supporting the huge welcome here for our service members.
Please welcome Vice Admiral Byrd to the podium.
There can be no finer calling than serving one's country. Thank you, Leslie. Good morning, all. Welcome and a very happy Veterans Day. Thank you for your attendance. Your presence is meaningful and clearly signals your very strong support of our veterans. Today is the one day we set aside to thank those that have answered the call to serve their country, a call that is unconditional, without reservation or qualification. There are men and women who have taken a solemn oath to support and defend our country against all enemies. In simplest terms, a veteran is someone who at some point wrote a blank check payable to the United States of America for the amount up to and including their life. Yes, as accurately inscribed on the wall at the rear of this courtyard, there is no finer calling. This claim is neither exaggeration nor hyperbole, but rather a timeless, fundamental, and indisputable truth. Now, during my years of military service, I witnessed this firsthand, having had the great privilege of working side by side with men and women of honor, heroes dedicated to the sublime cause of service to our country. Their purpose was pure, no complex philosophy or arcane motives, but rather because they believed it to be their duty, plain and simple. Reminiscent of the words of Stephen Decatur, they saw it as their country, right or wrong, but their country. The absolute necessity of such men and women, patriots, willing to answer this call to service, while essential to the very existence of our republic, is often taken for granted. Freedom is neither free nor far from assured. It's not a natural state. Otherwise, many more people would be free. Tyranny, oppression, dictatorship are the norm for a large percentage of our planet. As Thomas Jefferson cautioned at the birth of our nation, liberty must be bought and paid for by every generation. The tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants. Unfortunately, history has proven him tragically prescient in his warning. Now, in considering my remarks today, I thought I would provide you a personal perspective on Veterans Day. At the risk of embarrassment, and I'm sure future teasing, I will candidly admit my earliest understanding of Veterans Day was wide of the mark. Born out of the innocence of childhood, I believed that November 11th celebrations, the parades, the floats, the school holiday, were in recognition of my dad's birthday. Now, it's true that was my dad's birthday. He was born on November 11th. But you have to remember, this was a time in my life when I believed in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, and even thought professional wrestling was authentic. After it was explained to me that the day was about recognizing military service, quite frankly, it only furthered my belief that it was about Dad, since he was both a World War II veteran and a career naval officer. Naturally, with age and maturity, I came to understand the true meaning of Veterans Day. But I will tell you, even to this day, my first thought on November 11th will be about my father, my earliest hero. Today, as we thank veterans by celebrating their service, every veteran, every generation, it is equally appropriate to recognize and also thank those that make the service of veterans possible. There are so many that support, enable, dearly love, and serve our veterans, and that is both right and very good. Poet laureate John Milton captured it succinctly. They also serve who only stand and wait. On Veterans Day, we should not forget those who also serve. First and foremost, and always in my mind, are the military spouses who keep the home front going, raising children, managing the household, taking care of finances, and keeping everything on track as their veteran serves. While we can never understate the sacrifice, value, and immeasurable contribution of our veterans, in truest terms, The veteran could not do what they do without this love and support at home. Alongside the spouse are the children who bravely accept the sacrifice of an absent parent without complaining, demonstrating a very mature understanding of the value of their parent's service. Beyond the families, there are the amazing veteran service organizations and the wonderful military-friendly companies focused on serving the veterans and their families on a daily basis. Well, I feel most fortunate to have been able to serve my country in uniform. I am so very proud to work at USAA, where the dedicated employees come to work every day with the single-minded purpose of serving and helping our veterans, military community, and their families any way possible. And still they ask, what more can we do? Their answer is the very noble effort to support the veterans' hiring initiatives with the aspirational goal of finding every veteran that wants one a career. So on this day, let us also thank those that stand and wait and greatly empower our veterans. As I said earlier, my father was a career naval officer serving 20 years. With a family of 7 children, I watched my mother carry the incredibly heavy burdens and sacrifices during my father's absence and our many moves across country. Despite the demands of his career, my mother ensured we had all that mattered: love, care, nurturing. When I followed in my father's footsteps with a career in the Navy, my wife, my son, and my daughter supported me in too many ways to enumerate. From the very beginning, they were very bit as much a part of the Navy in service to our country as I was, but without the fanfare. My family understood and never questioned the sacrifice. They are far from unique. Millions of military families have experienced the same kind of lifestyle and challenges. Today on our program are several such remarkable military spouses. As you have heard, our MC is a very proud Air Force wife, and our singing group is solely comprised of military spouses. Thanks to all of you for your service. The Blue Star Families, a support organization for military families, has a terrific handbook with quotes of families that will ring true with anybody who has someone in uniform. I want to be an example for others, said one military spouse. It's okay to have bad days, but in order to take care of ourselves and our families, we have to try to have a positive front. Another military spouse talked about the serendipitous positive impacts of service. I know people think I'm crazy, she said, but for us, deployment only helped to strengthen our marriage. Being apart forced us to talk about anything and everything, to stay connected. As much as I missed him, I am grateful for the ways it enhanced our marriage and helped us grow stronger together. It has been accurately stated that we often take for granted the very things that most deserve our gratitude. Let us not be guilty of that today or any day. I recall as a midshipman and then a junior officer in the early 70s that we were strongly encouraged not to wear our uniform for fear of confrontation and negative reaction by the public. Yes, our fellow citizens. Many of our Vietnam veterans fared even worse. It was so disappointing, so discouraging, and completely perplexing. Today, 40 years later, the contrast is dramatic and refreshingly different. The other day, as I waited to board my plane, the now common, simple gesture of asking those in uniform to board first was made. While that is so very easy, it is so very right. We need to look for every opportunity every day to thank our veterans. Now, the most elegant answer I've ever heard to the question of why do veterans serve is they are Americans and that is what they do. Today, I would offer we should thank and support our veterans in simplest terms for the very same reason. Because we are Americans, and that is what we do. To our veterans, thank you. To all that support them, thank you. And yes, of course, happy birthday, Dad. May God bless all of you and God bless America. Now I am honored to introduce our keynote speaker, USA member Michael J. Durant. His story, remarkable, harrowing, and courageous, as you will see on this video, will live on for generations.
Black Hawk Down. How many times have we heard those words over the last 2 decades? Words made legendary by a 2001 movie. Behind the words, real life stories of grit, determination, and duty to the nation. The real-life story of Michael Durant. August 1979. Durant starts his Army career in language and intelligence training, but his dream is to fly. And fly he did, completing his Black Hawk aviator training, taking part in combat operations from the Persian Gulf to Panama, Desert Storm to Somalia. December 1992, Operation Restore Hope. The U.S. military goes into war-torn Somalia, working to restore order and distribute aid to the starving. August 1993, the situation on the ground has turned ugly. Brutal American casualties, a manhunt for the terrorist thugs. The battle for Mogadishu soon begins. October 1993, a mission to take out terrorist leaders goes very wrong. Not one, but two Black Hawks shot down. Durant, the pilot of Super 6-4, is injured, held captive, and finally freed after 11 days. A survivor, a hero, a leader on the opening stage of the war on terrorism. Retired Chief Warrant Officer 4, Michael Durant.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give Michael J. Durant a warm USAA welcome. Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much for that gracious welcome. It's great to be back here. I first want to thank USAA for putting on this event. I mean, it's a tremendous thing to be a part of. I'm so glad to be invited out here to share in this. Clearly, you live up to your commitment to veterans and active duty service members and their families, and I appreciate that very much. You know, when October 3rd, 1993 rolled around, I had no idea what was coming. None of us did. You know, we'd been in country for maybe 6 weeks, and everything had gone pretty well. We'd captured somewhere on the order of 26 individuals that we were out there trying to apprehend. We'd lost no aircraft and no people. It had really gone quite well. The overall mission in Somalia had gone well. You kind of lose sight of what was going on in the early stages of that operation when the mission was purely relief support. And it's something we should all be very proud of because, you know, up to that point, everything was done like clockwork. The initial invasion was done well. The security activities that went on for the next 6 months or so was all done well. But as you saw in the intro video, things began to unravel over the summer of 1993. But we felt like we still had a handle on it. I mean, things were going well. And we felt comfortable that we could go out there and continue to execute these missions until the job was done. I mean, that's really what our role is, whether we're in combat or back here supporting those in combat. We're going to do what we need to do until the job is done. I mean, that's the essence of being a veteran and supporting the military. At the end of the day, there were 2 Congressional Medal of Honors earned. There were multiple Silver Stars, multiple Distinguished Flying Crosses, and probably every other award for heroism on the list by the time the sun rose on the following day. There were 74 wounded, 18 killed, and 6 of us missing in action. Nobody woke up that day thinking that was going to happen. But when it did, when the impact hit us and the aircraft started going down, there were 5 aircraft shot down total. When the aircraft started going down and we started to lose people on the battlefield. I'd seen it before. I'd been in combat before, but never like this. And when it started to happen, the spirit of the American warrior came to the surface. And you know, sometimes it's not the people that you think are going to be the greatest warriors who emerge as leaders and the most courageous out there in these various situations. It's oftentimes the person you would not expect that to come from. There was a crew of a little bird aircraft that after the first bird went down, although this had never been briefed, it had never been planned, got on the radio and said, "Hey sir, we can fit in that alleyway, let us land, although we don't have any crew members in the back. One of the pilots can jump out and grab a few survivors quickly and get them out of there and get them to safety." Great thinking on your feet, great adapting to a very dynamic situation. Good idea, leadership agreed, let's make that happen, put those guys in. One of the pilots stays in the cockpit with the aircraft running, actually firing his weapon from the cockpit, while his co-pilot runs and grabs 2 or 3 of the operators who were injured and needed to be taken to safety. Not only did they do that, but once they got out of there, in the interim, I ended up being shot down, and they landed at my crash site as well. Same crew, trying to do the same thing. There was two Special Forces operators on board one of the other helicopters that after my bird goes down, they overfly the site, they realize there are people on the ground there that are alive, they're surrounded, they're in a desperate situation, we need to take some kind of action to help these people out. It wasn't the leadership that made the call, it was those guys right there at the point of the spear, seeing that need, recognizing that they had comrades in arms in harm's way, that knew action needed to be taken. They got on the radio. Initially, there was some hesitation with regard to putting those guys in, but eventually the discussion led to we need to do whatever we can to help out the crew, and those two individuals were dropped off at my crash site, and without question are the reason that I'm here today. For their actions, posthumously awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. There was a search and rescue bird that came in and put a reaction force on the ground near the first crash site. While they're still hovering, with soldiers hanging on ropes below the aircraft, they're hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. Because of all the training, all the discipline, performance under duress, all of those things that really are tested in those kind of situations, that crew did the right thing. They held their position, got those last people on the ground, and safely recovered that aircraft. Did they call it a day? No. They jumped in a spare helicopter and went back out and flew for 17 more hours in combat before being directed by the leadership to land and call it a day. It was those kind of things that I witnessed that to this day amaze me. And it's those things that have occurred through every combat operation that our nation's ever been involved in. It's going on today. Things that we'll never hear about. Somebody somewhere is putting their life on the line for their comrades. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know how we do it as a nation, but we create it generation after generation. And when you think about the fact that this generation in particular consists of an entirely volunteer force, it is absolutely an amazing thing. An entirely volunteer force at war for more than a decade is still out there every day doing those amazing, courageous acts in battle. The thing we kind of lose sight of also, that Admiral Byrd so eloquently put, is all the things that go on behind the scenes. We kind of forget about that because the focus is always on those that are in harm's way. But I will be the first to tell you that I can't do what I was being called upon to do in those situations without all that support, without the support of the folks in the rear, without the support of my family, without the support of my extended family, the industry partners that are out there building this amazing equipment that we all get to go to war with, the people that put all this in place years and years ago, the support organizations. It takes all of those things to support this amazing capability that we bring out there on the battlefield. And I am truly thankful to all of those organizations and all the people that represent that collective capability that is in support of our military. As I mentioned, there were 6 of us missing in action. Now, I didn't know that when I was shot down. Because of the particular situation that I was in, I was not aware of what was happening to everyone else, even from the crew, certainly not people from throughout Task Force Ranger. But there were things going on almost immediately to bring in more resources, to bring in additional help, to do the things that everyone realized were desperately needed to help us recover everybody on that operation. The last thing I think I want to talk about that's specific to that tactical event is when the situation had resolved itself and it had become a recovery operation, there was a refusal on the part of both the ground force and the remaining aircrew members at Crash Site 1 because they could not remove the remains of the pilots in that aircraft. They continued to put their lives at risk in order to recover the remains of my good friends who were killed in that first aircraft shoot down. They stayed at that crash site for arguably another 6 or 8 hours until they could actually recover everyone and take the entire force out to the final recovery site. So those are just some of the things that went on in that particular mission. And when you think about that mission, I've always considered it to be a turning point, certainly in my life. I mean, my life is nothing like it was before this happened, but really for our nation, because although it wasn't the first time we had gotten involved in unconventional warfare, it really brought it to light. I mean, nobody who was aware of anything at the time would have missed the fact that this mission is not what we've spent generations preparing for. We expected we're going to go fight the Soviet Union in the Fulda Gap, and now all of a sudden we're on the Horn of Africa, or we're in Panama, or we're in Haiti, or we're in Afghanistan, or Iraq, or Bosnia, or all these other places that look nothing like what we spent all that time preparing for. And what we had to do as individuals and as a military is transition. And it showcases yet another amazing capability about our force, and that is the ability to not only execute what you're trained and know how to do, but also be adaptive enough to both do the work you're assigned and transform yourself in real time into something new, different, and more capable. And that's really what's been going on in the last 10 plus years. In the middle of two conflicts, our military has transitioned itself into the kind of military that we need today. And that all has happened as a result of the quality of the force that we got out there in uniform today. It would not have happened without those amazing people. The change to my life has been profound. I was perfectly content to remain a pilot, flying for that unit until I retired. Unfortunately, sometimes life throws curveballs at you that you don't necessarily anticipate. And what did I do? I did what all of us do when we're faced with uncertainty and challenges. I adapted, I did my best to overcome, and I tried to uphold the standard that had been set by those who came before me. I think that's, when I stand up here and think that I'm following a piece on General Patton, I'm greatly humbled by that, and I would hope that he wouldn't chew my butt when my speech is over, because I said a few things that he didn't necessarily agree with. But it's those kind of people that I think you wake up in the morning, you hope, would that person be proud of me? That's what I'm trying to live up to. That's the standard, and that's why I'm proud to say I wore the uniform, and for many of you wear the uniform today, because of that legacy that exists throughout our military. In closing, I want to remind us all that although, as far as the national spotlight goes, there's not that much attention being focused on the things that are going on in Afghanistan, and quite frankly, in numerous other countries around the world, when you think about the influence that our military has out there on what's happening today in this world. But we know, as veterans, as active duty service members, and supporters of our military, that there are people in harm's way, there are people making those sacrifices, and there are families who are paying that price as well, with separation, raising children alone, all those things that Admiral Byrd described so well, and they're at the front of our thoughts each and every moment. It is why we do. It is their service that we recognize and we appreciate, and it is events like Veterans Day where we take a moment to thank not just them, but everyone who's served, everyone who's worn the uniform, active duty, reserve, guard, and supported those who do. Thank you so much for inviting me to share this with you here today. God bless you all, and happy Veterans Day.
Speaking of inspirational, have you noticed these gorgeous photographs that have been behind us this entire event? These are pictures of veterans, and each one has a story, and there's a story about the pictures themselves, too. They're photographed by someone called Stacy Pearsall, and they're part of this wonderful body of work called the Veterans Portrait Project. It was actually started back in 2008. And for Stacy, it's a personal journey of hope caught by thousands of images. Take a look.
I take pictures because I want to be able to tell someone's story in one frame. I was a combat photographer in the Air Force, and I sustained an injury in Iraq, which essentially ended my career. It was a really dark time for me, trying to figure out what exactly I was going to do. To be told that I couldn't be a combat photographer anymore was devastating. During my recovery in the hospital, I was amongst veterans that were twice my age, sometimes 3 times my age. I had one veteran sitting next to me ask if I was bringing my grandfather to his doctor's appointment. And it kind of made me laugh because I had to educate him that I was a veteran. But what I found in that process, in talking with this Vietnam-era veteran, was that our stories weren't wholly different, in that he came from a generation in a conflict that when he came home, he wasn't very welcomed. And when I came home from Iraq, I was a broken person, not just physically, but my spirit had been broken because I'd lost my career, essentially. I thought, well, if I can't be a combat photographer anymore, why don't I give back to the veterans that have given me so much and really lifted my spirits? So I started the Veterans Portrait Project. And it was really the inspiration I needed to push through the pain, push harder in my recovery, and to want to better myself. Are you a veteran too? No? No one's perfect. Every generation of veteran is heroic, steadfast, extraordinary people. And each and every one of them are deserving of being honored and thanked for all they've done for our country. And regardless of which generation they come from, I want to make sure that I thank them in the way that I know how, and that's through photography.
Thank you for your service. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, thank you. It takes a certain person to step up to the challenge of serving in the military, regardless of branch of service, because it's a lot to ask of somebody to give up everything in their life, put on the uniform, and go into a mission that you may not walk away from. That's a lot to ask for somebody.
Thank you for your service.
Every veteran that I've photographed has put me one step closer to being 100% whole again. Regardless of how long they served, whether it's a year or 22 years, whether it was during peacetime or conflict, deserves to have a pat on the back and a big giant thank you. And if I could go around the U.S. and hug each and every one of them and thank them for their service and take their portrait, then I will, and will try to do. And that's going to be my life's endeavor.
What a stunning story of service and denial. I mean, she literally illustrates generations of veterans. I would like now to call back up, I'm starting to get teary-eyed, so you have to forgive me, but I have my tissues. I'd like to call back up the American Military Spouses Choir, because they have some fantastic more performances to give us. First, they're going to sing Ain't No Mountain High Enough, which I know all of you here can relate with. And then they're going to sing the service songs. And when your service is represented, we ask that you please stand and proudly represent and sing and be part of it. I'm going to step away and come back when they sing the Air Force song, but I'm not going to actually sing because I would clear the room. But I'll be part of it. So please, let's get together and let's celebrate our military and our veterans.
Winter's cold can't stop me, baby, 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 baby. You're my go. No wind, no wind, no rain can stop me, babe, if you're my goal. Ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough to keep me from you. Nothing you can say can tear me away from my guy, my guy. Nothing you can do, 'cause I'm stuck like glue to my guy, my guy. He may not be a movie star, but when it comes to being happy, we are. There's not a man today who can tear me away from my guy. My guy. My guy. Ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough. Say it again. Ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough to keep me from you. Ain't no mountain high enough, nothing can keep me from you. Ain't no mountain high, ain't no valley low, ain't no river wide enough, baby. If you need me, call me, no matter where you are, no matter how far. Don't worry, baby, just call my name, I'll be there in a hurry. You don't have to worry, ain't no mountain high enough. Don't forget to sing along, stand up and cheer for your favorite branch of service. First to fight for the right and to build the nation's might, and the army goes rolling along. Proud of all we have done, fighting till the battle's won, and the army goes rolling along. And it's high, high, hey, the army's on its way. Shout out the cadence loud and strong.